The ornate halls of the White House once again became the center of global attention. Reporters pressed close, cameras flashing, as President Donald Trump took his seat beside Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky. The atmosphere was already charged when a question about Venezuela shifted the focus sharply south. And Trump's answer set off a new storm across Latin America. With his signature mix of bravado and certainty, the US president declared that Nicolás Maduro, the embattled Venezuelan leader, had offered everything to avoid a military escalation. The comment came amid reports that Caracas had quietly reached out through intermediaries, hoping to de-escalate the tense standoff in the Caribbean. He has offered everything. You know why? Because he doesn't want to mess with the United States, Trump told reporters, his voice rising above the noise of the briefing room. The remark, laced with profanity in the original English version, underscored both his frustration and his confidence in Washington's dominant position. But it was what came next that stunned the press corps. The president confirmed that US forces in the Caribbean had struck a vessel. Not just any vessel, but what he described as a drug-carrying submarine. Trump leaned toward the microphones and said, "We attacked a submarine, and it was a submarine carrying drugs, built specifically for the transport of massive amounts of narcotics. This wasn't an innocent group of people." He paused, letting the words sink in. Then came the pointed line that would echo across news networks. "I don't know too many people who have submarines." Within minutes, the statement was breaking news. Across Washington, officials scrambled to confirm details, while reporters sought clarification from the Pentagon. Trump's description suggested the target was a narco submarine, a semi-submersible craft often used by South American drug cartels to smuggle cocaine across the Caribbean toward US shores. But what made this different, analysts said, was that the vessel appeared to have been hit in international waters during an operation that was neither announced nor coordinated with regional partners. According to US officials, at least 6 such maritime operations have been conducted since August, targeting what the administration calls narco-terrorist boats. The running tally, 27 dead, several missing, and possibly in this latest case, survivors. Standing alongside Trump at the White House, Secretary of State Marco Rubio refused to elaborate. When pressed by journalists on whether there were survivors from the submarine strike, Rubio declined to answer, instead stressing Washington's firm stance against transnational criminal networks. For critics of the administration, that silence spoke volumes. International law experts warned that repeated attacks on vessels in international waters without arrests, evidence collection, or judicial process could violate conventions governing maritime security. Inside Venezuela, the response was swift and furious. President Maduro appeared on state television hours later, speaking from the balcony of the Miraflores Palace. Raising his fist, he accused Washington of aggression and vowed that his country would not bow to imperial threats. Behind him, the crowd roared, thousands of supporters waving the red, blue and yellow of the Venezuelan flag. The message was clear. Maduro was framing the confrontation not as a drug war issue, but as a defense of national sovereignty. Yet sources close to the Venezuelan military confirmed that quiet panic had spread through senior ranks. US warships, including the USS Gravely, a guided missile destroyer of the Arleigh Burke class, have been stationed for weeks in the Caribbean Sea, operating just outside Venezuelan territorial waters. Satellite images published by defense analysts show American naval activity stretching from the Gulf of Paria to the northern approaches of Colombia. Local fishermen have reported hearing explosions at night, the distant echoes of what they describe as sea battles no one admits. The US Navy has not released footage of the most recent strike, but a short clip posted on Trump's Truth Social account showed what appeared to be an aerial recording of 2 small vessels engulfed in fire. "Another one down," the caption read. The authenticity of the video has not been independently verified. Meanwhile, the USS Gravely was seen returning to Norfolk Naval Station in Virginia, its crew silent, its decks spotless, its flag at full mast. For the Pentagon, the mission had been accomplished. For Washington's allies, the questions had only begun. The Trump administration has long accused Maduro of leading the so-called Cartel of the Souls, a shadowy network allegedly controlled by elements within the Venezuelan armed forces and responsible for trafficking cocaine into North America. The US has offered a $50 million reward for information leading to Maduro's capture. But as sanctions bite deeper and diplomatic ties remain frozen, the lines between counter-narcotics operations and acts of war are blurring. In the Venezuelan countryside, the government's response was unmistakable. State television broadcast images of Interior Minister Diosdado Cabello marching alongside farmers and militia volunteers in the town of Caracas. With machetes raised high, they pledged to defend the homeland against what they called foreign aggression. Venezuela is not alone, Cabello declared, his voice booming through a field microphone as hundreds of farmers echoed his words. We will fight in the mountains, in the fields, wherever they come. The scene recalled the propaganda of earlier revolutionary eras, but for many Venezuelans, it was also a chilling sign that the government expected further attacks. Across Latin America, reactions were mixed. Colombia, long a US partner in anti-narcotics operations, issued a cautious statement emphasizing the need for respect for international law. Brazil urged restraint. Mexico's foreign ministry called for an immediate de-escalation. At the Organization of American States, debate turned fierce. US allies defended the strikes as legitimate operations against organized crime, while others warned that Washington was using anti-drug rhetoric as a cover for political coercion. In Europe, reactions were equally divided. The European Union refrained from comment, but diplomats privately expressed concern that unilateral US actions could undermine broader regional stability. Back in Washington, Trump appeared unfazed. Addressing reporters later that evening, he doubled down on his remarks. We've been patient for a long time, he said. We've warned them again and again. Now we're taking action. The president's words reflected a broader strategy, one that merges his America First doctrine with direct, sometimes theatrical shows of force. For Trump's supporters, these actions reinforce his image as a leader who doesn't hesitate. For critics, they mark a dangerous disregard for diplomatic norms. Within Venezuela, rumors swirled that the targeted submarine may have carried not just drugs, but also sensitive military materials. Local media speculated it could have been linked to factions within the Navy operating without Central Command approval, a possibility that could explain Maduro's desperate outreach to Washington. If those reports are true, said one analyst in Caracas, then Maduro's offer of everything was an act of survival, not diplomacy. At the same time, the humanitarian crisis in Venezuela deepens. Shortages of food, medicine, and fuel persist. The latest World Food Programme data estimate that more than 8 million Venezuelans face food insecurity. International relief agencies warn that any escalation at sea could further disrupt shipments of basic goods. For the United States, the domestic optics are complicated. Trump's firm posture resonates with a voter base that views his stance on Latin America through the lens of national security and drug interdiction. His political opponents, however, accuse him of using military force for campaign theatre, a rally around the flag maneuver ahead of a volatile election year. The symbolism of confirming such a strike during a joint appearance with Zelensky was not lost on observers. The juxtaposition, Ukraine's war with Russia and America's standoff with Venezuela, served to project global resolve under Trump's leadership. Yet it also reinforced concerns that Washington was stretching its military reach on multiple fronts. Analysts point out that deploying naval forces so close to Venezuela increases the risk of miscalculation. A single mistaken identification, a fishing vessel, a Coast Guard patrol, could trigger a crisis spiraling far beyond narcotics enforcement. In Caracas, government media portrayed the US president's comments as proof of aggression. Maduro's nightly broadcast opened with dramatic music and grainy footage of burning vessels. The empire attacks again, the anchor declared. But inside Miraflores, insiders admit that Maduro's tone has shifted. Privately, he has instructed aides to explore indirect communication channels through Mexico and Turkey. The key word now is survival, says one former Venezuelan diplomat. Every move is about staying in power and avoiding open confrontation. Back in Washington, the Pentagon's official line remains firm: defensive interdiction. The Department of Defense insists that all operations are conducted in accordance with maritime law and that every target has been linked to narcotics trafficking. Still, human rights groups are demanding transparency. Amnesty International has called for an independent investigation into the submarine strike, citing reports of missing crew members who may have been adrift after the attack. For Venezuelan families of the missing, the silence is unbearable. In coastal towns like La Guajira and Carúpano, mothers wait for word that may never come. Fishermen whisper about debris washing ashore, fragments of fiberglass hulls, an oil drum, a torn life vest. Meanwhile, on social media, Trump's post about the strike has amassed millions of views. His supporters hail it as a decisive blow against what they describe as narco-terrorist regimes. His critics, including some members of Congress, argue that the president may have authorized lethal action without congressional oversight. In the Senate, lawmakers are demanding briefings. If this was a US military strike in international waters, we need to know under what authority it was carried out, said one Democratic senator. The White House so far has not commented. As night falls over Washington, the lights in the Situation Room remain on. The US Southern Command continues monitoring the Caribbean theater, while Venezuelan radar stations go on high alert. In the end, the story of this confrontation is as much about perception as it is about power, a war of words, images, and political leverage. Trump's phrase, "he offered everything," now circulates across headlines and hashtags, symbolizing both a boast and a warning. For Venezuela, it is a reminder of isolation. For Washington, a demonstration of reach. For the rest of the region, a question mark hanging over the future. How far is too far in the name of security? As the White House press room empties and the echoes fade, one reality remains. A single comment, amplified by modern media, has once again pushed two nations to the edge, not with a declaration of war, but with a microphone and a phrase that still reverberates across oceans.